Do you currently have an editor right now, or?
So for all beginning writers, you need an editor. Get
Mm-hmm.
one, use one. If you can't afford an editor, then you need to create a process for it. And I um, I have I have people who edit me. They're not formal editors. I've used formal editors in the past, and I had a weird experience which kind of took me out of using editors directly. And that was that um, I had I built up a relationship with a at the time he was an up and coming cover artist. He's a very big name now. I can't even afford him anymore. But he did a bunch of my covers for a while when I could afford him, and so I had him redo. I have a older series, a post-apocalyptic fantasy series called the Malia Chronicles, and it's 6 books, and it's done, and it's been done for years. And I wanted to redo all the covers and have them branded together. And so he agreed to do this. And since I was redoing those, I figured, you know what, I'll pay my son to read the finished books that I have, and just to catch any last minute, spelling mistakes or little errors that made it through the professional editors I paid for. And he found so many mistakes in the first book that my jaw dropped. And I'm like, why am I paying these people to do this? So what I ended up doing, what I do now is I have my alpha readers, which are my wife and my son. They go through a pass in it and, of course, give me all their mistakes. I've gone through it several times myself. And then when I go to my beta readers, they're my launch team, there's about, I'd say 6 of those people who are just actively send me all the typos they find. And so in terms of copy editing and proofreading, I have like 8, well, including myself, about 9 to 10 people who go through it and find all that. Where if you have a good editor, you may only need that one person.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to developmental editing, other than my alpha readers, my wife and my son, it's just me, and I don't mind that. I kind of feel like it's like a garage rock. I'm putting out what my heart in its raw form. This is what I come up with, and if people don't like it, they're going to let me know. And so far, thankfully, I have a readership that really likes what I'm putting out. So I really don't need an editor to sit and say, well, you really need to make this character fuller, because if they say, if that's the case, my readers they'll let you know. They'll either let you know by giving you comments saying, I don't like this character, or they'll just stop buying, and that's always a good way. If they're not buying. Now I have I'm at a stage now where I'm in small parts working with publishers on different little projects, and so it's their money, it's their company, and if they want me to, if they put in a developmental editor, to make the book what they want it to be, which is what a developmental editor does in a publishing house. Which, if you don't mind a short digression, because I think this is something really important for writers to understand, is that writers have this myth in their head that they're going to write a book. Let's say they get with Tor, and Tor's developmental editor is going to read that book and work with you to make it the best book it can be. And that's not really true. It's not wrong exactly. They are going to make it the best book it can be, but they're going to make the best book it can be for Tor. So, for example, if you write a story where truly the best ending of the story, from your heart and from all objective, if there was possibly an objective view on a book, if the best thing that could happen was that the main character dies, that's what it should be. But a developmental editor at a major publisher, and we're going to assume the book is fantastic, is going to do everything to persuade you that's not the right thing to do, because you can't have a sequel.
Yep.
And their job is to make the most money for their publisher, not for you, for their publisher. Make the best book for their publisher, not for you. So ideally, those things overlap, and the best book for you is the same thing that they want. But you've got to remember that sometimes that's not true.
Now, when you're writing, would you say that you write for your audience, or do you write what you want and let the audience come to you? If that question makes
Yes.
sense. I like that. All right.
um, Initially, I write for myself. All my series started with an idea that I just wanted. This is what I wanted to write. This
Mm-hmm.
is what I wrote. Um, there's no doubt now. For example, with Max Porter. Max Porter is. I just put out the 11th book last month, and it is my bread and butter. I'd say half of my income, of all the books I have out, all the series, half of my income comes just from that series. So it's important to me that that series continues to maintain a high level of, well, all my series I want to have a high level of quality, but that one in particular has got to satisfy the fans. So there's no doubt in my mind now that when I come up with ideas, I'm still writing for myself, but because I'm a fan of the series too, and ideally the things that I want to see happen are things that they want to see happen. However, if I ever came up, for example, okay, the three main characters are Max Porter, the ghost detective
Marshall
is
Drummond.
Marshall
Mm-hmm.
Drummond, and Max's wife Sandra. That's the three are at the core of everything. And I remember my son asking me, saying, "You ever going to kill any of them?" Just out of curiosity. And I'm like, I don't think I can, even if I wanted to. Even if I got to a point where I'm like, all right, it's time for one of them to die, or for the ghost detective to go away, I couldn't, because I think that would the series readers would revolt. And there are some tertiary characters that have been added to the mix over the course of the series, like Max's mother. Eventually, somewhere in I forget, like the fifth book or something, she moves down and ends up becoming more part of their family. I don't even know if I could get rid of her at this point, because so many people like her. And so, in that respect, the fans do get, they get a say in things. And I don't think that's necessarily bad for a long-running series. It can go bad if you let them dictate everything. But if you're thinking about upsetting the apple cart for no reason, they'll let you. You don't listen to your fans, then that's a problem too, because they're the ones paying the bills.
That's a good point there. So I have actually was introduced to you through the Max Porter series, of course, and I got Volume 1. It's a compilation there of several great stories. I encourage any readers out there to go out and get it, by the way, and read it. Do the characters in this book have any correlation to people in real life that you know, or are they maybe based on other literary characters out there loosely for copyright reasons?
Yes and no. There's no one character is ever directly correlated to any one human being. I wouldn't do that for a lot of reasons, especially not just legal reasons, because you start to go into dangerous territory,
Mm-hmm.
as well as you don't want that person finding out, and then perhaps they don't like the way you depict them. However, there are aspects of characters or moments from characters' lives that are directly ripped from my own life, people I've known, things like that. Max's mother, who, if you're in that compilation, that's the first 3 books, and I think Max's mother is just a voice on the phone in those.
That's correct.
ones.
Mm-hmm.
So spoiler to you, she eventually is going to become a full-bodied character in the later series if you keep reading it, which I'm sure you will. But yeah, she's just on the phone there, and many of those things that she says are direct quotes from my 2 grandmothers, who have both passed away, so I don't mind revealing that. But yeah, some of the crazy stuff they said was directly said to me by my grandmothers, and I was just like, I'm going to use it because it's perfect for what I need. So there's things like that. Max and Sandra's marriage is. A lot of it is taken from my own marriage, either specific moments or just the general feel of the marriage, or how I imagine my wife and I would react if we were dealing with a ghost and dealing with those types of situations. Which is slightly amusing because from people who don't like the series, I've seen reviews on Amazon or comments where they're like, nobody has a marriage like this. This is so fake, and I'm like, it's my marriage. But then I have other people who really, their marriages are similar, and they're like, this guy understands what a marriage is about. So it's it's your own personal take on things.
You can't make everyone
happy. And then, and I don't even try. And then the only literary thing is pretty obvious, I think, that the Ghost Detective is inspired by the noir detectives of the past. Sam Spade, books by Dashiell Hammett and Mickey Spillane and all of it, Mike Hammer. So there's no doubt that they all kind of filter into drama.
And he's also period specific for about that time anyway, so it ties in well. So you're writing basically a 1940s detective in the style of a 1940s. So it's fascinating because I'm a huge fan of that genre too. I can read a Phil Marlowe with the best of them or a Lou Archer, but and most people don't even know who these people are anymore. But
some people don't. But what's really been fun is as the series grew and popularity grew, I ended up writing a spin-off series called the Marshall Drummond Case Files, which are short stories to novella length stories about Marshall Drummond when he was alive. And those have been a blast to write, and people really responded to those as well because we get to see more of that noirish thing. Because even though he is a noirish ghost, he's still living in a contemporary world in the Max Porter books. But here we get to see him in the 1930s and 40s, and that's been a lot of fun for me to write lately.
Now, I noticed in the Max Porter series, there's a ton of historical reference in there. For that book in specifically and other books in general, how much time do you think goes into research into one of your books before you even commit it all to paper?
Right. It used to take a lot. Again, I've written 11 books in the series, so a lot of that information now is getting hardwired into me and rewriting my brain a little bit. So I'm a little bit, it goes a little bit faster. The early books the first book probably took several months of research. And then for a while, I would plan about a month of research. Now it depends on how quickly it comes, but initially it would take me a few weeks of just reading all the bizarre histories I could find and about various murder cases and things until I found the right elements. And it's usually a couple different pieces of history that click together and have enough unknown things in them that I can say, oh, I can twist that, I can use that, and then I can build a story around it. But I've read a lot of those books about the various hauntings, the various murders, the various odd cases of Winston-Salem and the Triad of North Carolina, that I've had cases, it's happened several times where I've come across something and I'm like, oh, I can't use that for this book, and I can make a note. So then 2 books later when I go to use it, I already have the research kind of done. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that helps a lot. And I've gotten just in the habit of a couple times a year, even if I'm not working on a Max Porter book, I have kind of a research book that I'm just kind of thumbing through and looking at and reading a little case history here or there. So when the time comes to write one, pieces of it are there to come together, and I just have to find a few other details. I've also become very good at you're kind of training yourself in the process. So the early books, I'd be reading everything, and every little story I'd read, I'd just finish them, and I'd be like, well, could I use this? How could it work? And now, sometimes I'm going through and like 2 pages in, I'm like, no, that one's not right. I'll skip it. And then the second I find one, like my brain just goes, that's the one. That's what you need. And I don't know exactly how it knows, but it works. So I'll go with it. And that's for those because there's so history involved. It's things like the Nathan Kay books are just, things I make up. So those are much easier to put together because really there's no history other than they take place in real places. So sometimes I got to do a little research on a location if I can't go there myself. Oh, and that's actually that's the other really fun and cool thing about Max Porter books is I'll do all that research, but it all takes place in this state that I'm living in. So usually I take at least a day and go for a day trip to wherever it is, take pictures, see the places, and that makes it so much easier because when you're actually there, you hear, smell the area, you get all this sensory information you'd never get just from looking at it in a book. And a lot of details of stories come up just by going, oh, that's over there on the right and that's on the left. I didn't realize that, but now that I do, that means that in the actual scene it could work a different way than I was envisioning, that kind of thing.